I've been thinking about the difference between the way we celebrate Easter on Easter morning and the way we celebrate it tonight at the Easter Vigil. And I know this is going to sound a little duh to you, but it struck me that the difference is we celebrate Easter on Easter morning, it's daylight. And when we celebrate Easter at the Easter Vigil, it's night. Now, I realize the first 9 readings is not really celebrating Easter yet. I guess you could argue about where we start, probably the Gloria, but certainly by the Gospel. I mean, we read Matthew's Gospel tonight, and it's definitely Jesus has risen already Gospel, you know. But this idea of celebrating it during the day or at night stuck with me, and I'd like to offer you these reflections based on that. First of all, the image I have, or the scripture that came to me about celebrating Easter morning, Easter during the day, it comes from the book of Revelation. In just one verse, John is having one of his visions, and he sees a vision of a new heaven and a new earth and a new Jerusalem. And he writes this about the new Jerusalem. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine upon it, for the glory of God is its light, and its lamp is the Lamb. And so this is a city that does not have any darkness around it or in it. It's a city completely in the light, so much so that it's giving its own light, so to speak. The light comes from the glory of God in it and has no need of any kind of artificial light. The scripture for the Easter Vigil, celebrating at night, that came to me was from the beginning of John's Gospel, where John writes that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. What came to me is that we don't live in the Easter day, so to speak, when we don't live in that eternal Easter where there's no darkness anywhere around. We live in the Easter Vigil celebration of Easter, so to speak. There's still darkness around us. Darkness of sin, darkness of illness and death, the darkness of war and other kinds of armed conflicts, of crime, the darkness of political parties that can't cooperate even in the face of a national emergency. There's all kinds of darkness still around us. But we live in a darkness that has a light in it that cannot be overcome. I think what I am pulling from this is that the Easter Vigil, in a sense, offers us 2 invitations. Because, first of all, the light that we celebrate tonight is not the artificial light of a light bulb, an LED bulb, or a fluorescent bulb. Think about how we normally start Easter Vigil. It started with a bonfire. And the light that has come into the world, Jesus, is not a pale artificial light. It's the dynamism of fire. It's that heat of fire, And so we light the Paschal candle from that Easter fire. And the Paschal candle becomes one of the great symbols of Christ in the sanctuary. And so the first invitation, seems to me, that comes from that is Jesus calling us to him. As you know, he says in John's Gospel, when I am lifted up, I will draw all things to myself. And you know yourself, if you've ever had a fire a campfire, a bonfire, it draws, suddenly everybody is around it, Campfire in the woods will draw sometimes animals just curious to what's going on, As you know, I like to light a fire in my little fire pit in my backyard. And I can't tell you how many times somebody's come up and said, Father, I saw your fire. Do you mind a little company? Just as fire seems to draw us to it, so Jesus is drawing all things to himself. And so comes the first invitation to let ourselves be drawn into Christ, to let go of what we hold on to so dearly of this world, to let go even of ourselves, our own wills, and our own hopes, and let ourselves be drawn into Christ. The second invitation, I have another scripture for that, comes from Luke. And Jesus says in Luke's gospel, I came to cast fire upon the earth, and would that it were already kindled. Jesus came to light a fire on the earth. And when I want, and he himself, of course, is the first spark of it. He is the first light. But when I want a brighter or hotter fire, what do? I throw on more logs, And so here's the second invitation, it seems to me, from the Easter Vigil. Are we willing to let ourselves be thrown on the log of Jesus' fire, or as a log of Jesus' fire? And so, first of all, are we allowing ourselves to be drawn by Christ? Are we allowing him to dispel any darkness left inside of us? And secondly, are we willing to be part of the fire that Jesus wants to burn on the earth? Because the bigger and brighter this fire is of Christianity, the more people it will draw to it. So there we are. And I invite you to answer both of those invitations. Let yourself be drawn into Christ. Let him come into you and dispel whatever darkness is left in you. And then secondly, let yourself be used by Christ. Let yourself really be thrown on his fire to blaze up and be a light for others. I know this is dangerous to single out one single person, but because all of you, and I said this before, I'm so proud of you. Many of you are letting yourselves be used in this time in ways that God shows his love for others. But I think most of you are aware of the Good Friday Stations of the Cross, that it began with an idea that Megan Johnston had. And so many people helped her, and she would be the first to admit that. And I don't know who they all are, But her idea, her willingness to be used by Christ, from that drew other people. And then we had Stations of the Cross all around the city, people driving all around, Catholics, but non-Catholics were intrigued by this. There were the couple of the news stations did some interviews about it. This is just an example. We let ourselves be used by Christ, and suddenly there's a little more light blazing up and drawing more people to Christ. So I just invite you tonight to think about those two invitations. To let yourself be drawn into Christ and let your own darkness be dispelled, and to let yourself be thrown on the fire that Christ has started burning, so that this fire may blaze up hotter and brighter and draw even more people to him. Let us praise tonight the risen Christ. God bless you all.